Okay, so we all know the big ones, right? The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, huge deal. And yeah, they're epic, magical, totally beloved for good reason.
Absolutely. They cast these enormous shadows over the whole genre.
Exactly. But beyond those mainstream giants, there's this whole universe of, well, incredible, diverse fantasy films that just, for whatever reason, don't really get the spotlight.
Yeah, they fly under the radar.
So let's unpack this. That's our mission today. We're diving deep, looking at sources like this great article, 10 great fantasy movies nobody talks about.
Mm.
We want to bring you, a shortcut to being really clued into a much broader range of fantasy cinema. Forget the usual suspects for a bit.
Yeah, let's dig into some hidden gems.
Get ready to maybe discover some new favorites, find some surprising facts, and just explore stories that really push the boundaries of what fantasy can even be.
It's fascinating, actually, how many unique, really imaginative stories just didn't quite hit it big at the box office. Or maybe they didn't have that huge marketing push behind them.
Right, overshadowed.
Totally. We get caught up in the hype of the blockbusters, and we risk missing out on so much richness. What our research really shows is just how broad fantasy is. It's not all dragons and wizards,
Definitely not.
We're talking everything from like heartfelt rom-coms with a magical twist to these really thought-provoking kids' fables, even surreal horror that uses fantasy to critique society.
That's a really interesting mix.
Yeah, these films, often smaller, they give you completely different perspectives. They enrich our whole understanding of what the genre can do.
That's a fantastic point about breadth. And speaking of that, let's dive into some films that stretch fantasy into these surprisingly human places, like romance and those big life choices.
Okay.
First up, Just Like Heaven, 2005. It's a fantasy rom-com. Reese Witherspoon, Mark Ruffalo.
Right, I remember that one.
The premise sounds kind of familiar at first glance, two people clashing over an apartment, but the twist. Witherspoon's character is actually the spirit of a comatose woman haunting her old place, and Ruffalo's the new guy who moved in.
So a very literal ghosting situation.
Huh. Yeah, pretty much. A classic rom-com setup, but with this very ethereal third wheel.
It really is. And what makes Just Like Heaven kind of unexpectedly insightful, based on our research, is how it uses that exact premise,
Yeah.
the disembodied spirit thing.
How so?
Well, it basically strips away all the physical stuff in the romance, right?
All right.
It forces the characters and us watching to think about whether connection can be purely spiritual. Like, can love actually transcend the physical? Because a surprisingly profound take on vulnerability in relationships, all wrapped up in this lighthearted package. And our sources say it really deserved way more recognition than it got back then, especially with all the other rom-coms out at the time.
Yeah,
It
true.
wasn't just, delivering on its promise. It was actually exploring something pretty deep about human connection.
Okay, and staying with that theme, life's big choices.
Okay.
Let's look at The Family Man from 2000, Nicolas Cage.
Ah, Nick Cage. Always interesting.
Right. Here he plays Jack Campbell, this total workaholic Wall Street guy. But then, through some kind of, fantastical intervention, he gets a glimpse of the life he could have had.
The what if.
Exactly. He wakes up married to his college girlfriend, Taya Leone. They've got kids, living this totally different suburban reality, completely opposite to his high-flying bachelor life.
Yeah, it definitely echoes classics like It's a Wonderful Life. You can see the inspiration. But our sources really emphasize that the Family Man's unique angle is how it looks at the cost of ambition.
The cost.
Yeah, it suggests that, success, as we usually define it, money, status might actually blind us to the richer, maybe quieter lives we could be building.
That makes sense.
Cage's character is forced to confront what a rich life even means.
Yeah.
It's not just about second chances or fixing regrets. It's about him realizing he might have completely misunderstood true fulfillment.
And it's a different kind of role for Cage, too, right?
Yeah. Totally. It shows this really wholesome, earnest side that sometimes gets lost behind his more expressive performances. It uses fantasy perfectly, not just for spectacle, but to dig into what we really value.
That is powerful. Okay, so we've seen fantasy reframing choices, connections. Let's maybe pivot to something a bit darker, where maybe our inner demons get quite literal.
Ooh, okay. Darker fantasy.
Yeah, films where fantasy gets more surreal, maybe even horrific, often exploring society or psychology in really unexpected ways. First one, Horns, 2013.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Yep, Daniel Radcliffe. But this is not Harry Potter magic, not even close. He plays Ignatius Parrish, this guy falsely accused of murder, and then boom, he inexplicably starts growing horns.
Actual horns.
Actual horns. And gets these really unsettling paranormal abilities along with them.
Right. Horns isn't just dark fantasy. Our research shows it's this really chilling commentary on, like, mob mentality, the core to public opinion.
And how do the horns play into that?
Well, Radcliffe's literal horns become this grotesque symbol, right? It's like society projecting its own inner demons onto this guy they've already condemned. The film brilliantly and kind of disturbingly explores what happens when someone leans into that monstrous perception to find a dark truth.
Wow.
It challenges your expectations right away. I know one user comment we saw debated if horns is even fantasy.
Right, the genre question.
Yeah, but for me, the magical horns, the paranormal stuff that firmly plants it in fantasy. Plus, it's based on a Joe Hill book, Stephen King's son. He's a master at blending horror with these deeply fantastical, often really unsettling elements. It pulls you into this surreal, genre-bending ride.
And sticking with Surreal. And Nicolas Cage again, actually.
He does seem drawn to these, doesn't he?
He really does. Let's talk Dream Scenario, 2023. This one's recent, and I gotta say, super inventive. Cage plays this ordinary professor.
Paul Matthews.
Right. And he suddenly starts appearing in people's dreams, all over the world, just showing up.
Which initially makes him famous.
Exactly. A bizarre kind of overnight celebrity. But, predictably maybe, things take a really dark turn when his dream appearances become violent, nightmarish for other people.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Dream Scenario is this potent, almost unsettling commentary on celebrity culture, and the internet. How fame is so fleeting and often brutal. How public perception can just flip on a dime.
It really captures that viral phenomenon feeling.
Totally. It uses the strange, often terrifying logic of dreams to hold up a mirror to society. It reflects back our anxieties, our weird desire for connection, but also our capacity to idolize someone one minute and, well, vilify them the next.
That's spot on.
Our sources really highlighted the genius in showing how blurred the line gets between reality and this kind of public fantasy. Both Horns and Dream Scenario, they challenge how we see reality. They use fantasy brilliantly to critique modern life and human nature. They stick with you.
Definitely unsettling, but fascinating. Okay, so from the truly surreal, let's shift again. Maybe towards fantasy dealing with imagination, childhood, even what happens after life.
All right, different vibe.
Yeah. First, a cult classic for a lot of people. Drop Dead Fred, 1991.
Oh yeah, Rick Mayall.
The one and only. It asks this kind of fascinating, maybe slightly terrifying question. What if your imaginary friend showed up again when you're an adult? Phoebe Cates plays this troubled young woman, and her chaotic childhood fantasy pal, Fred, suddenly reappears to cause mayhem.
It's true. Drop Dead Fred was marketed like a kid's film. But our research, and honestly just watching it, it digs into much darker stuff. Childhood neglect, emotional abuse.
Really? I remember it being mostly slapstick.
There's plenty of that. But the article we looked at pointed out its dark subtext made it hard to market, got poor reviews initially. Looking back, though, it tells this compelling story about imagination not just being fun, but being a coping mechanism, maybe even masking trauma.
Huh. I never thought of it that way.
And clearly it resonated. User comments we saw called it deeply moving, a cherished childhood favorite for those who kind of got that underlying, more serious message. It's a prime example of a film maybe misunderstood in its day.
That's a great point about films being misunderstood. Okay, going back a bit further now, to a true musical fable, The Point, 1971.
Harry Nelson.
Exactly. Envisioned by the legendary Harry Nelson. It's this animated children's fantasy story about Oblio, a kid born with a round head in a land where everyone else has pointy heads.
A simple premise, but so effective.
It really is.
And that story, despite being simple, has this really powerful message, right? About carving your own path, embracing individuality when the world wants you to conform. And the music, obviously, is legendary because Nilsson did it.
Of course.
Our sources noted how, despite the art and the heartfelt story, The Point is largely forgotten compared to other movie musicals from back then. But listener comments, pure nostalgia. People remember the songs, the impact it had.
Sounds lovely.
It's this gentle kind of philosophical fantasy. Reminds us to look beyond the surface, in people and in ourselves.
Okay, and now for something completely different again, but still deep in fantasy and big questions. Defending Your Life. 1991.
Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. He wrote, directed, starred. It's an afterlife fantasy. Brooks plays a guy who's just died.
Daniel Miller.
Daniel Miller, right. And he finds himself in this kind of bureaucratic waiting room, Judgment City, where he has to literally go on trial. He has to defend his life choices to see if he gets to move on to the next phase of existence.
It sounds potentially heavy, but it's incredibly witty.
Utterly brilliant, yeah.
So what does this all mean, all right? Brooks's genius here is using the afterlife as this sort of mundane trial. It exposes all the anxieties, the self-imposed limits that stop us from really living.
Like fear holding us back.
Exactly. It's not just live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
It's about confronting the self-sabotage that, let's be honest, defines a lot of the human experience. It forces the character and us to ask, did we truly live or did we just exist? Hesitate.
That cuts deep.
It really does.
Yeah?
And it explores so many of the same ideas that made a show like The Good Place such a hit decades later, but with this unique, very humanistic Albert Brooks spin. Listener praise we saw just raves about its brilliance, its humor. It absolutely deserves a spot among the best for its profound take on purpose and choice.
Yeah.
All these films, Drop Dead Fred, The Point, Defending Your Life, they use fantasy in such diverse ways to explore identity, our past, what it all means.
It's such a powerful thread connecting them all. Okay, to round out our deep dive, let's broaden the scope one last time. Let's look at international fantasy cinema, specifically animation. It often gives us incredible visuals, complex stories.
Great idea. Animation is perfect for fantasy.
We're looking at Suzume, 2022, Japanese filmmaker Makoto Shinkai. It's a fantasy coming-of-age adventure, the last film in his disaster trilogy.
Shinkai's work is stunning.
It really is. It follows a 17-year-old high schooler, Suzume, and this mysterious stranger. They basically team up to travel across Japan, preventing these supernatural disasters linked to mysterious doors.
What's so compelling there is that beautiful blend of these deep fantasy concepts with just absolutely stellar animation. You know, Studio Ghibli often dominates the conversation about anime films in the West, but films like Suzume really showcase the global appeal and the incredible quality coming from other Japanese animation studios. And Makoto Shinkai is just top tier.
Yeah, his visuals are breathtaking.
Our research noted it's the 4th highest grossing Japanese movie ever. That's huge. And it absolutely deserves more attention from Western audiences who might be missing out on this incredibly rich tapestry of fantasy storytelling from other cultures.
Right.
Animation especially gives such freedom for these complex, imaginative narratives, a visual scope that live action sometimes just can't match. It's a great reminder that fantasy is truly a global language.
Wow. Okay, what an incredible journey through these under-the-radar fantasy films. We've hit everything from rom-coms, challenging connection, to family dramas about roads not taken.
Right, the surreal horrors holding a mirror to society.
Poignant fables, live action, animated. It's just crystal clear the fantasy genre is so much bigger and more varied than the blockbusters might lead us to believe.
It truly is. And the value of looking beyond those well-known hits, you just can't overstate it. You find unique perspectives, different ways of telling stories, profound themes you might totally miss otherwise.
Yeah, it makes you rethink the genre itself.
Exactly. It encourages us to think about what really makes a fantasy film great. Is it just box office, recognition, or something else? There's so much more waiting when you dig a little deeper. Each of these films proves that in its own way.
So, a final thought for you, our listener.
Yeah, this raises an important question, maybe. How might discovering films like these change your own personal definition of fantasy? What other hidden gems could be out there, maybe even in other genres, if you start looking beyond the mainstream?
That's a great question.
Think about that joy of finding art that really speaks to you, you know? Regardless of whether it was a huge hit initially, we really hope this deep dive gave you some fantastic new films to check out.